All right, not only is my next guest my fondest Fox News sister, she's also the co host of the hit show Outnumbered and now the best selling author of the new and the amazing book, Under His Wings: How Faith on the Front Lines Has Protected American Troops. The wonderful, the perfect, my friend Emily Compagno joins me now. Emily, first of all, it's great to have you. I will get to see you in New York very soon, but congratulations on the book. I knew that it was going to be a bestseller. I knew that you were going to smash it out of the park, but congratulations. And I know that it's because you're a fantastic author with a fantastic message, but why do you think this book is resonating so well with your audience, the Fox News audience, the American people?
First of all, thank you for that kind and very generous introduction, Tommy. You know you are my favorite. And guys, I didn't pay her to say that, for real. To be honest, Tommy, I think the reason it shot to number one is because America is thirsty, and that this book serves to slake the thirst of the American people that have been starved of all faith, that have been starved, I should say, of actually the blessing to talk about faith under this current administration. And I think under the persecution that has occurred systematically under this administration and with the Democrat Party as it's been wielded like a weapon for so many years, people have been afraid to come forward with their faith. I think it's been stamped out in schools. It's been stamped out in politics. It's been stamped out societally and culturally. And while there have been pockets of people who unabashedly have proclaimed their faith in Jesus Christ and faith in general, I think writ large, there was just a muting of it. And so I think now this is sort of delivering into people's hands, first of all, me serving as a messenger for the extraordinary voices within that are saying, we inspire and embolden you to proclaim your faith in Jesus, and also that you're not alone and you never were. God is always with you. And also there is fellowship that is always with you. And I know for sure that it's inspired at least one individual to feel that way. And if it's one, then that's a success to me.
No, it certainly is. And, your book combines a lot of different things. Not only is it faith, but it's also your love and all of our love for the United States military and people who have fought for our country, for our freedom, the service and the sacrifice. But another thing that it's doing, which I think is so important, and I had the ability at an event of yours to be able to meet one of the subjects that's told about in your book, is it's allowing people to connect with older generations that have done extraordinary and incredible things and to hear their stories that maybe they would have never heard before, if not for reading your book, because they weren't aware of what these people did. They weren't aware of the service, the sacrifice. They weren't aware of the faith that went into what they did and the heroics that they were able to achieve. So I want you to tell one of those stories that I had the pleasure of hearing about at an event of yours from Colonel Mo, because it's an amazing story. And I think that the people that haven't read your book yet, just give them a taste of this story that's in your book, along with many others.
Thank you for that. And I think, too, I will say that history books, they chronicle just the black and white details, who won, who fought where and when, but it omits that entire layer of faith, the source of the soldier's courage to do the unthinkable, the source of the comfort that the soldier found in battling the effects of the brothers making the ultimate sacrifice, and et cetera. So Colonel Mo, who is an absolute national treasure, was a POW in the Vietnam War for almost 6 years. As an Air Force pilot, he had the wherewithal, after our own munitions exploded in his wingman's F4, engulfing both F4 Phantoms in flames, exploding both. He had the wherewithal during his inverted tailspin, so basically upside down, spinning in a circle, to radio back to save the lives of every other United States Air Force pilot that was already in the air and that was taking down the runway, because the Air Force then had claimed that the munitions issue, the fuse issue, had been fixed. Colonel Mo's flight was the first flight aground, or taking off above ground, since the munitions were fixed, since they lost 13 pilots in 1 week. So he radios back, he saves everyone's lives. The reason, by the way, that he has 2 silver stars, one of them being that, and he evaded capture for 3 days after crash landing in the jungle in a rice paddy in Vietnam. And he extinguished his own radio as he heard the enemy closing in, knowing that it would prevent them from obtaining classified information, secret information, but knowing also that it extinguished all hopes of being rescued. That's the kind of hero that he is. And the thing is, he was a hero of faith, Tommy, and he prayed for, during his almost 6 years again of his torturous captivity. The book details this torture, but it details his faith. because he prayed for the strength to endure. And he says God answered that prayer every day, all day, over and over again for almost 6 years. And the first question that he asked when he was eventually rescued by the Americans, or I should say, when the peace accords from Paris were executed and the Vietnamese let him go, and when the Americans got him back and they had, their briefing session, the first question Colonel Moe asked was, what was the name of the pilot who died trying to save my life? That's the kind of fellowship, that's the kind of brotherhood, that's the kind of heroism that these national treasures represent. And again, that hero of faith whose story I'm honored to share.
And an amazing man and a humble man who would never tell his own story, by the way. That's another thing. Maybe if asked, he would, but when you just meet him, you have no idea what a hero he is and was. You have no idea what he was able to accomplish because he's just such a humble person. And that's why your book goes into telling these stories from their perspective. And it allows younger people to realize the sacrifice that older generations made for this country. And that's something that I think that we're losing, not only faith in this country, but young people, they don't seek to know about older generations, what they went through. I think if they did, they would have a better understanding of what it really means to struggle, to serve, to sacrifice. A great lesson. So I hope that young people are reading your book as well. I know that they are. Everybody's reading it. Obviously, you're a bestseller. But, I want to talk too about some kind of, in my mind, disturbing trends that we're seeing with young people. We know that Bible sales are up this year. So that's another good sign. People are buying your book. They're buying Bibles. I think faith is making a resurgence. But we also have data that shows us that young people, particularly young women, are not going to church. They're not involved in fellowship as much as maybe older generations once were. And there's a lot of, I guess, an attraction to being spiritual without being faith-based, to being, believing in kindness and love, which is great, but not necessarily believing in a God or in a higher being, or maybe not classifying yourself as a Christian or as a Jew or, as any other religion, just wanting to kind of be individualistic. And that's not always bad, but in some cases, I think it's leading to some societal rot. What have you noticed in talking to young people that you talk to about where we're heading in this country? And do you think that there's some hope that we're going to maybe come back home?
I'll answer the second question first, which is that yes, there is hope. Absolutely, there is hope, and people are coming home. And I think this sort of dovetails in with our initial commentary where we talked about America's thirst to be emboldened our faith again. And I think now churches are feeling emboldened, for example, to encourage the church, meaning that the body of the church, to be active in the community, to take part in politics. You always talk about, Tomi, the strength and the validity of participation in local politics, right? And churches are encouraging us to do so because that's the Judeo-Christian fundamental tenet, right? It's leaving the world a better place. It's participating. It is not putting your head in the sand. So I do see that resurgence in part, again, because of the incoming administration that clearly will not persecute Christians, will not persecute you or prosecute you for protesting abortion, for exercising your First Amendment right, for worshiping. It will not participate in regulations preventing worship, et cetera. And then to answer the first question, about the sort of mode of the youth right now, I think there's two different phenomenons, and one is pretty typical, right? And that's simply popularity. And I think that many students and youth who are just sort of waving in the wind with what's popular then might participate, to your point, spirituality or kindness without having the fundamental roots in fact, religion and faith. And that second tenet, that's what goes back to the home. So I think now, again, under the incoming administration, and also because of the societal push for this, people are respecting and creating and instilling the values in the home. It's dinner around the table with your parents or with your parent, with the phones put away. It's participation in conversation. It's going to church as a family. And then under those pastors being taught the biblical theology. So it's not just a free-for-all. And I think the reality is, if your kids are not being influenced by you, then who are they being influenced by? And the answer might be those apps that are China CCP owned and therefore have algorithms that are popularizing, anti-Christian, pro-radical theology or popular behavior that has no roots in theology. I mean, the spectrum's quite large, and it can go from straight up insidious down to just mildly, behaviorally untenable. But the reality is, again, back to that influence, if you are not the influence, then likely the social media is.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. There's also a rage with young people. They want to attack each other on camera for likes and validation. They want to do horrible, disgusting things to one another because they find it fun, or maybe it satisfies boredom. I mean, it's not all young people. Of course, we're seeing the worst of the worst being portrayed on social media, but it's also, talking about the United Healthcare CEO's assassin who, obviously came from a good family of what we know. It comes from a privileged lifestyle, but is still so mad and so angry at the world. And it's not just him, but it's many others that are so angry, whether it's school shooters or just simply people who, haven't found their place in society, haven't found their place in school and community. And I think going back to a faith-based lifestyle, as well as parents leading their families in a much more active way, could solve a lot of those problems. And Emily, in your book, you talk about faith, but you talk about people that have served their country. You talk about responsibility and accountability. You talk about people that did wonderful and great things, and they didn't seek validation for it. They did it because it was the right thing to do. Tell me a little bit more about some of those stories in the book, and by writing it and talking to these people, something that you learned that you didn't know before writing.
So one story, and it dovetails in what we're just talking about. I interviewed a Gold Star mother, Laura DeRue, who lost her son Gabriel in Iraq, and his platoon mates called him. They nicknamed him John 3:16 because he was such a strong Christian, and for such a young age, because Laura and her husband had brought him up in a strong Christian faith-based household. But she says that his faith grew deeper on his own, and it grew deeper actually in the military and service. And he had plans. He wanted to come back to Iraq in peacetime and serve as a pastor. And it was important to him to model what that faith-based value life was like for his fellow soldiers. So, one time his sort of a joke, like, one of his commanding officers was like, give me, swear or drop down and give me 100 push-ups. He did the push-ups. The whole point is that he wanted to demonstrate, to model those values for the brothers around him. And he wrote a letter home, Tomi, and he said to his parents, he said, if there's a grenade, I'm going to be the first one on it, because these other guys here, they need more time to get right with God. Even at his young age, he was that mature of a Christian, and he died for this country, indeed presciently. Thankfully, after having a child with his then wife, so there is Gabriel Jr. that survived him. And his mother went on, Tomi, we talked about sort of the eradication of faith systemically and systematically by this current administration and the party that was in power. And the mentions of faith and God had been wiped from Gold Star ceremonies, from funerals, from Gold Star family associations. And his mother restored that. She sort of started this movement to bring back that language and that faith. So in Gabriel's honor and his legacy, he was such a strong Christian, again, a youth, and such an imprint with that. And she carried the legacy forward and made a lifetime impact. So that chapter, Gabriel's Light, is what I named it, because his light truly is still shining after death. And that was his legacy that she carried on. Another young man, Jeremiah, who grew up on an Apache reservation, in and around the Apache reservation in Montana. And his mother's indigenous Apache, his father was Montana cowboy, he says, and line of warriors on both sides. Apache warriors, his father served, his grandfather was a highly decorated Korean War veteran, and he knew he was going to be a warrior. And growing up, when he was on hunts with his father, in the sort of dark Montana wilderness, whenever he would feel fear, he would repeat this sort of seemingly meaningless phrase. And he said it to me. He called it, quote, mumbo jumbo. Didn't know what it meant, but he would always say it when he felt fear his entire life. And he asked his mother about it once. She said, that's the creator. That's Jesus. But you'll find out what it is later. And cut to, he joins the military. He becomes an elite Green Beret. He's following in the footsteps of his warrior legacy on both sides. And in the thick of a firefight in Iraq, as bullets are, he's being shot at and he's shooting back, and he goes into detail of exactly this very violent firefight and what is happening. And he's repeating that phrase sort of in the back of his mind as always. And then he said, time stops. And he said, I don't know if I was saying this out loud or in my head, but the phrase presented in English. And all of a sudden, I knew what it meant. I knew what I had been saying my entire life when I felt fear. Jesus is always with me. Jesus is always with me. And that moment of realization, to reaffirm that he was never alone and had never been alone, that is a theme of this book, Tomi, that a lot of these war fighters in the thick of these, Vietnam ambushes and Battle of Mogadishu and firefights in Iraq and so much more, that they realize or learn or reaffirm that they are never alone and were never alone. God is always with them and they always have fellowship.
Such a beautiful story. And you talk to these people, and I know because I know you personally that you deeply care about every single person that you got a chance to know and to write about. And you tell their stories with such passion. And I'm sure that they are so grateful to you for documenting these stories that maybe would have gone unheard in the way that you tell them in this book. So it's obvious to me why it's a bestseller. In wrapping up here, I think there are a lot of people, especially young people, who watch you on TV. They maybe are interested in reading your book. They want to live a faith-based lifestyle, but it's really intimidating to them because they didn't grow up with it. They didn't come from a religious family. They've never gone to church before. They don't have those traditions, but they're intrigued by it and they want a place to belong, and they feel like maybe faith and religion is a place where they can belong, but they're intimidated by jumping into that world. They don't know where to start. They don't know how to incorporate God, Jesus into their life because they never have before, or they have and they never really understood how to fully connect deeply, truly, authentically, genuinely. What advice would you give those people on how to start their faith journey?
That is such a great question. And Major Jeff Strucker actually talks about that in his chapter. He's one of the war fighters from the Battle of Mogadishu. Everyone probably recognizes him from the movie Black Hawk Down. He talks about, Tomi, how he was raised in a household devoid of faith, devoid of all mention of God, and how he was saved. So my first piece of advice would be read this book, because for sure it will resonate. Absolutely, there will be something in there, a voice in there that will resonate for you, for a young person who is craving faith. And secondly, that it's so easy and simple. Jesus is with you now. So to take that first step, all you have to do is say yes to Jesus, and the resources are there. Start with the book. You can get into a church. Any of us are resources to reach out. But I think, the intimidating thing, it's not Jesus and that's not God. Any intimidation only occurs in this earthly realm in the form of an overstructured, perhaps, church that has been existing in 2024. But there's no need to be intimidated because God and Jesus are love. Get in a Bible-based church. There's online Bible studies, but definitely if you read the book, there is so much scripture in there and there's so much theology, and you will come away knowing, again, that you are never alone and that you are never alone in fellowship. There's resources everywhere for you.
And the miracles of God and of our Lord and Jesus Christ are in your book. And it's really easy for people to read those and to understand it in a way that's not intimidating, in a way that's not preachy, but really is just authentic and beautiful. Emily, thank you so much for taking the time. Congratulations again on your book, Under His Wings. I hope everybody who hasn't got it already will go and get it. It's a great book for any time of year, but especially this time of year. And people have so much optimism going into a new administration. And this is a great way to commemorate that. Emily, I hope to see you soon on the Outnumbered couch. God bless you, and I will see you very soon.
Tomi, thank you for this time. Really, this means the world to me. And any success with this book, really, it's an answer to my prayers, and it is all God to get out these extraordinary war fighters for our country and in the army of Christ, their stories and their voices. So thank you for helping to make that happen.
Of course, always. And thank you for writing it and telling these stories. It's so important. And I will see you soon. Thanks so much, Emily.
Okay. Bye.
All right, folks, that was a very special episode of Tomi Lahren is Fearless with my good friend, of course, Emily Compagno. You can see her weekdays at noon Eastern on Fox News. Oftentimes, I'm on the couch next to her on Fridays. Very excited every time I get a chance to be around her. She's truly a beautiful, wonderful soul, and this book is fantastic. I had the opportunity to meet one of the people in the book, as we discussed, and a phenomenal human being. So please go out and get Under His Wings. That is it for this episode of Tomi Lahren is Fearless. As always, you can catch the full episodes on Fox Nation, also on our YouTube channel at Tomi Lahren is Fearless. We certainly appreciate your support. From Nashville, God bless and take care. Hey, thanks for watching. If you want more of my hottest takes, must-see conversations, and of course, my final thoughts, click here and make sure you subscribe here so you never miss a beat. I'll be here every weekday, and I hope you'll join me.